Humans are gross. We make a ton of garbage. Why is Alabama the dumping grounds for everybody else's garbage? We had heard that there was a wildfire out in Moody, but we didn't realize that it was in fact a landfill that was on fire for quite some time.
We live about 300 feet from this fire. We have a lake out front. We eat the fish, or we did. Catch and release from now on, you know, because it's downhill from this monstrosity.
I was sitting on my porch one day and there wasn't any smoke, I didn't smell anything, and then all of a sudden the wind blew just a little bit and I felt like I got hit in the face with the most horrible fumes and I had to go inside. I was coughing. I mean, it really made it difficult to breathe.
It is this sweet, sickly sweet, gross, just pungent smell that you can't get away from. But it also tastes like you're sucking on a penny.
It wasn't like smelling somebody burning trash or somebody just burning, fire in their fire pit. It was really a strong, gross smell.
When they cut through this fire break, it exposed a wall of tires. And that became the line of the fire break. Well, one caught, another caught, another caught, and it then went the entire length.
So a green waste landfill is supposed to be only trees and brush, like the kind of garbage that landscapers would haul off. It's not supposed to be tires and garbage and creosote-coated power poles. So there were tons of things that were there that were not supposed to be there. They were not supposed to be in a green landfill, but nobody was stopping them.
I think the community has learned that their health and safety is not the priority of the Alabama Department of Environmental Management. When we started collecting water samples here in early January, that was the first sampling that had really been done here a month and a half after the fire had started. And then another nonprofit, Gasp, had stepped up and installed air monitors on people's homes here in the area. And between our effort with water and Gasp effort with air quality, the state finally started doing some sampling of their own.
There was just very little communication from our state government in any way about the fire when it was burning.
And what the Department of Environmental Management was telling them was it was nothing more than a campfire, that it was safe to breathe.
I am not thankful for the Alabama Department of Environmental Management. They've known since 2013, 10 years, that there were non-natural items on site that could cause fire. Why is it not being regulated? How is that allowed to be there when you know that the residents are there?
The fact that the fire happened in the first place is really pretty disgraceful. I mean, we should have greater protections. We should have our landfills inspected and regulated, and that we should have regulations for all landfills. And I think that this definitely raised awareness for the fact that we don't.
I think the way Alabama operates is things will change only if there's a disaster. The environmental movement was born out of disasters, and laws were made to prevent those disasters from recurring. But as time goes on and the disasters are fewer and fewer, then things get lax again.
Well, I hope that everybody in Alabama that's learned about this is more aware of the trash we're producing and the negative effects that can come from it. And not just our household garbage, but when you're remodeling your home, when you're having yard work done, where's all that stuff going to?
There are industrial landfills, which are typically larger industries that choose to dispose of their industrial waste on their own property. Another category is what they call construction and demolition debris landfill. That would be if a building was torn down and there was wallboard or 2x4s or cement blocks. And then there are municipal solid waste landfills.
When you throw something in your trash can at home, that is where it goes. That means household garbage, a lot of restaurants garbage, a lot of food matter, but also clothing you may discard or other things that you as an everyday person throw away end up in a municipal solid waste landfill.
And then there are landfills that accept only vegetative waste, also called green waste. Vegetative waste landfills right now are not permitted and not regulated by ADEM. EPA requires states to regulate municipal solid waste landfills and construction and demolition landfills. And so ADEM takes the position that that's all we're going to do.
I'm now concerned for future situations that they need their feet held to the fire a little bit. Ours have been, why not theirs?
I think one of the most challenging parts of this landfill fire, and certainly the unregulated dumping and the loose restrictions in Alabama, is that the burden falls on citizens and nonprofits like Cahaba Riverkeeper and Gasp to get out here and do sampling to demand that our Department of Environmental Management does their job. And I think it's clear here at this site that had citizen groups not stepped up to really push for some type of solution, that this fire would have been allowed to burn for months more.
I am a director of Friends of Pinchgut Creek, and we do conservation work and take care of the Cahaba headwaters. And we had people reaching out to us, emailing us and texting me saying, hey, are y'all going to do anything about this landfill fire? And at first I was like, okay, well, the group that I work with, we are about taking care of the water. I don't know anything about landfills and landfill regulation or air pollution, not really, something that I felt like our group really was responsible for or knew much about at all. But Alabamians are suffering because of lack of responsibility from our Department of Environmental Management. So when I decided, okay, yes, I'm gonna help organize a rally, it was great. I think a lot of times when something goes wrong, people care about how it affects them. But when we were organizing that rally, I got to know some really amazing individuals who weren't just caring about how they were affected. They wanted to prevent this from happening to other people.
We all have a tendency to get busy in our life and focus on what affects us first. But the residents in Moody didn't generate this trash. It didn't come from their household garbage. This was waste that was brought here from all over the place. And so when we don't require people to dispose of our trash properly, we're really encouraging these types of issues for other people.
When landfills get sited, the local government is required to give approval as the first stage in the approval process. In Alabama, the landfill almost all the time enters into an agreement with the host government to provide an incentive for host government approval. That agreement says typically, you can dump your waste in our landfill for free, but we're also going to take waste from everywhere else in the state and outside the state.
Alabama has sort of advertised that it is a cheap place to dump. We've taken coal ash, we've taken sewage sludge, PFAS contaminated sludge from wastewater treatment facilities.
other states creating better regulations for their landfills or having better zero waste goals can result in those states sending their waste to states like Alabama that don't and probably never will have regulations stronger than what EPA requires.
If we could get rid of those agreements, at least being made prior to local approval, then I think you'd see local governments say, well, what's in it for us except a bad landfill? And you'd see them disapproving them more often than not.
We find big dump sites all across our watershed and certainly across the rest of the state.
About a year ago, I had some scouts that were cleaning up a creek, and they found a dump site that probably had 3 dump trucks full of garbage, furniture, construction debris, just dumped right next to a creek. And that happens because people don't want to pay the price to dump things legally.
We have been investigating another issue just down the road where an oil and gas recovery business had been abandoned, and upwards of 50,000 gallons of oil and gas had just been left in rusting, leaking containers on top of the same creek that drains out of the landfill.
I also asked ADEM if they could identify the green waste landfills in Alabama. And they wrote back, no, we can't. We don't know where they are or how many there are. So there's no reason to think that the Moody landfill will be the only problem landfill.
The Alabama Department of Environmental Management has ignored the outcry of residents and then forced those communities to deal with the fallout.
Can you cuss in this film? We have a department whose job is to protect the people, to protect the environment, and to make sure that we have a clean, safe place to live. And that department has failed us.
I've had a lot of clients that have complained about odors to ADEM. They send out an inspector and he sniffs around and says, there's nothing unusual about this odor. Well, what does unusual mean? All landfills may have a usual smell, but that usual smell may be objectionable and it may cause health issues. So the answer that there's nothing unusual about the odor, is not an answer.
The very first thing that the Alabama Department of Environmental Management could do to limit the impact of these type of facilities is to regulate them, to permit them, and to have some degree of oversight of what's being dumped there. And then when they investigate sites that people complain about, to follow through and actually carry out the enforcement that they are authorized and obligated to do.
The only way that ADEM can be held accountable is by complaining to ADEM, by complaining to the Environmental Management Commission that oversees ADEM, by complaining to their legislators.
We know we have some legislators that really truly care and want to create greater policies for landfills and greater regulations. But what good is it going to do if they go through the effort of making stronger policies if Alabama's Department of Environmental Management doesn't do their job?
We've been fortunate enough, I guess, up to now, not to have a green waste fire. But had ADEM been regulating green waste landfills, as I say they are required to, they probably would have been putting non-combustible cover over the waste material periodically. That would have prevented the fire from burning down. But because ADEM doesn't regulate, there is no cover, and therefore everything can burn. And it's very hard to stop.
A lot of people don't even know that landfills emit air pollution. Not only poor management of the landfill, which amounts to not adequately following the regulations, but also the type of waste that's being disposed there. It makes municipal solid waste landfills, but also landfills generally, a complicated source of air pollution to deal with. If you don't know what's going in them, then it's hard to know what they're emitting. And if you're not required to test what's being emitted, that could potentially create a disaster for the environment and anyone who might be living around the landfill.
This landfill here is a warning for all of the other people who live around unauthorized landfills or unregulated dumps, that this is what could happen. PFAS are a family of chemicals. They're called forever chemicals because they were designed to be durable. It doesn't break down in the environment. You can only incinerate it at very high temperatures. So even with this massive inferno at the landfill, it didn't destroy those chemicals, and they are continuing to leach out of the groundwater that's coming out of the bottom. As we're looking to address PFAS contamination across the state, we've taken samples here at the landfill, at other sites on the river. Water keepers around the United States have taken samples in water bodies all across the country. And the results from this landfill were worse than the vast majority of all that sampling. We know that this is a source of PFAS pollution, and we should catch it at the source and stop it before that goes down into the river and continues to accumulate in fish that people eat and water that people swim in, and ultimately becomes our drinking water when it gets to Birmingham.
So in June of 2023, EIP filed a petition for rulemaking with the EPA, which is a legal document that we filed, asking the EPA to revise its Clean Air Act regulations for how they regulate landfills. Asking the EPA to directly regulate methane from landfills, to include a lower temperature standard, requiring gas collection systems at more landfills and requiring them earlier, requiring landfills to install landfill cover, which essentially amounts to dirt. Even though it sounds silly, just throw dirt on it, as we saw with the Moody landfill fire. If it's the right kind of dirt and the right amount of dirt, it really does a lot.
In this case, the EPA was forced to step in because ADEM didn't have the ability to clean up or put out the fire. And so not only are Alabama taxpayers footing the bill, but national taxpayers.
ADEM publishes lists of municipal solid waste landfills and construction and demolition debris landfills and industrial landfills. I've also published on my website a map of where the municipal landfills are in Alabama. And I've noticed recently that University of Alabama has a map of supposedly all the landfills other than green waste landfills. It's surprising that ADEM hasn't published a map. ADEM has a pretty decent website that contains a lot of information. And I would say often that's the information on ADEM's website is not very revealing. And it may be that citizens need to do their own investigation. Video evidence is extremely compelling.
Here in Alabama, we don't have any organizations that strictly focus on monitoring landfills or dumping in the state. It's really important that people take ownership of the environment where they live and participate in not just enforcement and supporting groups like ours, but in discussions with the city, the county.
I'm hoping that green waste landfills will become regulated, because as I see it, the law already requires it. I'm hoping that one day the citizens of Alabama will demand that their legislators do more.